So, hi everybody. My name is Samantha Evers, and I am one of the marketing specialists here at the Hemp Doctor. I also do a lot of work with our retail marketing, anything that has to do with like in-store presences, and I also help manage our Salisbury location. So, I have a lot of on-hand experience when it comes to retail sales. And today I'm going to be talking to my lovely friend Clay Kramm, who is a member of our wholesale team. Clay, let the kids know today who you are, and I want to know what your role is at the Hemp Doctor, what your background is in cannabis and sales, and what your favorite color is, Clay.
Awesome. Yeah. So, hey, my name's Clay Kramm. Yeah, I work with the sales team and the wholesale department here at the Hemp Doctor. Basically, oversee lots of retail distribution accounts. And a little bit about my background. I've been in the cannabis space for roughly 12 years now. Started on the cultivation side of things. Worked on some pretty big cultivation products with some different medical and recreational companies throughout Florida and across the country. Really, I was a consultant for a big consulting firm out of Denver, Colorado. So, my background is primarily around cultivation and design and build out. But I saw where the hemp space was going and decided to jump on board about 3 years ago. And yeah, love it here at the Hemp Doctor, doing a lot of really cool big things. And yeah, couldn't be happier.
That's so wonderful. And Clay, favorite color, man?
Oh, blue all day. Yeah,
Blue, like
all
a
day.
like a royal blue or like a sky blue? Like what's your
Oh man,
favorite
like
blue?
any, uh, I guess just like a sky blue. I don't know, any blue. Any blue's cool with me.
Cool. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, okay, so now that we've knocked the dust off of this thing, so today, guys, we're going to be talking about how to increase sales using things like a cannabis strain guide and how to increase our sales at the retail level. We can do all the advertising we want to. We can put out flyers, we can have great SEO presence, we can market till the cows come home, but if your bud tenders can't close a sale behind the counter, where your profit's going to go. So today we're going to be talking about kind of a practical guide and how to increase sales using more knowledge. So what we're going to look at today, we're going to be looking at customers that don't know how to shop. How do we guide customers that are unsure of what they want? For customers that are looking at things like indica, sativa, hybrid, how do we take that experience to the next level? What other things do we need to consider beyond those three basics? We also want to look at helping beginners versus experienced shoppers and how that experience differs for those two customers, how staff should figure out who those customers are and how to guide them. And then also how we use a strain guide, how we link different effects for different strains across different products. We want to touch a little bit on shelf strategy and merchandising, and then just in general, like where stores can improve on the retail experience for guests. So, Clay, I think kind of where we wanted to get started, at least when we talked about this initially, is we see a lot of retail outfits that are just losing sales with their bud tender strategy. Someone comes in and says, "Hey, I'm here to buy cannabis products," and they say, "Sure, let me know what you want," and that's as far as the conversation goes. So, how does an unguided customer really affect the retail process? You've seen a lot more wholesale outfits than I have.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the biggest issue there is just education. I think the industry is just still in its beginning stages. It's still new, even from a medicinal recreational level. But hemp alone, I mean, it fired up in 2018, really, right? So, there's a lot of people that's within the industry that really just don't have the knowledge around the products and really like how that product got there, what it does. So I think that just education alone with those individuals would help, a lot. And just asking the right questions. I mean, if somebody comes in the shop, I think that, you obviously need to know, hey, is this your first time, experimenting with hemp or cannabis, or, hey, are you an intermediate, user? Are you using on occasion, or are you using all the time?
Sure.
If you are, somebody that's coming in that is just getting, into wanting to experiment with it. A lot of folks, I think they mess up by giving them something too heavy. So, my recommendation to those, clients that are coming in that are new is, hey, start small, give them something that's a very low dose. And, if it doesn't work, you can obviously work up to where you need to be. And yeah, I
Sure.
mean, there's a bunch of different questions you can go, around asking, with clients that come in that are experienced
Yeah.
users, hey, what are you using this product for? Is it for pain, or is it for, sleep? Or, hey, are you using this recreationally just to relax at the end of the day, like you would with, other adult beverages? And yeah, just kind of, honing in on, hey, what are you in here for? And then diving into, okay, here's what we have to offer. And here at the Hemp Doctor, we have a wide range of products, from smokables to edibles to tinctures to CBD products that aren't sedative at all. So just asking the direct questions and finding out like why are you actually in here and what kind of user are you before you
Yeah.
go into pitching products.
I think in so many ways it really comes down to like a curated experience. I think like we're likely initially to try to pair a customer up with something that we enjoy without really taking into account what the customer's goals are. And customers that don't feel guided in this like big world they don't fully understand tend to buy less product. We see it in our stores too. If you don't put something in front of your customer with a reason that it's going to work for them, they're never going to discover it. So a staff that has more understanding that they're able to guide a customer base is going to close more sales. We can see that a more educated staff has a better chance of closing a higher ticket.
Yeah, yeah, and that too. Like you have a lot of people that come in that's very, user friendly, and they have their ways and their things that they like, and they're very consistent with what they get. And
Sure.
there's a lot of things out there that people, if they were actually pitched in the right ways and would actually try this other option, they may like it. So
Indeed.
don't be scared and don't be hesitant to say, hey, I know you get this certain item, every week. Same thing all the time. Well, have you thought about trying this? That and
Right.
just upselling in those ways. You may find something that person would have never tried had you not asked the question. So,
Absolutely.
that's another way to upsell.
So Clay, I'm gonna pitch you the one that always makes me cringe when they come into our stores because I feel like the public is so misinformed on this topic. And that is THC and THCA percentages. We see them on everything. Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Is it 40%? Is it 70%? And people get so hung up on these numbers, especially when it comes to flower. So if somebody's looking at a flower menu or talking to your bud tenders about flower, and they come at a bud tender with a what's the highest percentage thing you have, what's your best way to tackle that? I kind of have my own strategy. I'm just curious as to kind of how you like to coach people to handle that.
Yeah, I think that, people in this industry in particular have really marketed around, total THC strength and percentages. And,
Mm.
the average customer that comes in, they really don't have, the knowledge around flower, and what it is and what's in it. And, everybody's wanting that, hey, I want, if you don't have something that's 30%, I don't want it. Well,
Right.
flower, and with my experience, I've grown a ton of flower, medicinally, recreationally, you name it. And, have seen a ton of lab results come through and have tested it in many different ways. And, I wish we would market it more around terpene profile. So,
Absolutely.
terpenes have more to do with the actual feel and flavor and, high that you get than actual THC percentage. So,
In
just to kind of yeah, and just to give you just a little example of this, I grew a 9-pound hammer strain. It was 2,000 plants a room.
way to brag,
Had
Clay.
yeah had 2,000 plants in one room, 2,000 in the other. All
All
these were
right, Clay,
cloned
we know
off of the
you're
same
cool.
mom. Yeah, yeah. And I took one room and fed them super heavily like you would, weightlifters. I mean, plants and people are very much the same. And fed this one room super heavy, like a heavy weightlifter that's going and eating all these proteins and just keeping his body juiced up and getting huge. And fed the other room as it needed it, and kind of let it stress a little bit and gave it food as it needed it, as it asked for it. Well, the food that the room that I fed super heavy, and I've done this with I experimented with this with multiple strains. This is just one in particular, but that room that I fed super heavy came out at 32%. What everybody wants to see. It was super high in THC content. It was really green, really bulky, just pretty flower. Everybody likes that Instagram flower. Just beautiful.
Yeah,
And
sounds nice, right?
yeah, right. Looks great, on paper, sounds nice. But the other room that I fed half the amount, and gave half the attention to, it kind of stressed out a little bit, yellowed out, still a beautiful flower. The yield wasn't, near what the other room was, but the THC percentage on it was only 22%. Then when we did a full, panel test on it, we actually looked deeper into the terpenes. Well, that room that was at 22% had twice the terpene profile that the 32% had. And we did a study.
Right.
So we actually put, a handful of people in a room and we tried the 32% one day and, and then the next day we tried the 22% with the enriched terpene profile. And every single one of those members chose the 22% over the 32% all day long. And the reasoning
Right.
behind that is, the 32% was super salty. It wasn't really a smooth, smoke, and got you really heady for about an hour or so, but just the flavor wasn't there. And the
Right.
coming off of it wasn't, the best. The one with the enriched terpene profile, people found that it was a smoother smoke, more enjoyable, tasty, and it actually lasted, roughly 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
So just a more pleasant high that you would get off of it. And I find that in any strain that you would deal with when it comes to cannabis and flower, you really, I wish we would market more around terpene profile rather than total THC percentage. Because if you look into certain
Yeah.
strains and certain genetics, with certain enriched terpene profiles, um, if you really study it and actually try it, terpenes have a lot more to do with the high in the field than actual THC percentage. So, that's just a little
Absolutely.
story, that, a little test that we've done. And again, I've done it multiple times and it was the same answer every single time.
No, and you're absolutely right. It just does not, the percentage just doesn't capture the entirety of like what makes that flower special. You're literally just reflecting THC all by itself in a plant. And that is only going to get you so far as what the experience is going to be like. And then you add in all these concentrates and things like that. That's really kind of messes with it. I think people have a hard time seeing how that affects, like they think that you add a sugar diamond and it doesn't matter as long as you have a higher percentage, it's going to be better. And that's definitely not the case.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, and to answer your question too, with your bud tenders that are dealing with these issues, like you have the guys that are coming in most frequently that are looking for those, higher percentages. You start to build a relationship with them over time. And a lot
Hmm.
of these guys in here, are using the products themselves. So, really try to focus and talk about, terpene profiles and what they mean. I don't want to get into it too heavily. Everyone out there can do their own
Sure.
research on, the different terpenes and, what they mean. And, you can actually go to Leafly is a really good one, and look up different strains and, the genetic profile behind it on, the different terpene content that's on average within that strain. And if you have a strain in there, it's a slower mover that may be, of a lesser percentage, really hone in around the terpene profile. Try it, get some feedback yourself if you do try those kind of things, and really pitch that to your client and say, hey, I know you really like this 30%er over here, but this guy over here that's 24 has, these terpene profiles in it, and it's a way, this is a really enjoyable, flower too. So I would
Yeah,
highly recommend you trying it. Just, throwing that out in those kind of ways, I think would really help, kind of change the thought process behind how people,
of
go about buying
course.
flower.
I always have the same like way I put it to customers in store. And that is it's kind of like going to buy a car. If you go to a car lot and you're looking at different vehicles, the THC percentage or THCA percentage in our case is rather like the gas pedal in that vehicle. It tells you how like fast that car can go, but it doesn't really give you a full picture of what it's like to drive or own that vehicle. Like what are the seats like? Is the stereo any good? Is the gas mileage any good? Or is there a sunroof? Is there a convertible top? There are so many other things that go into a car purchase than just the gas pedal. And that's how we hope we can get people to celebrate their flower. Like THC percentage is just one part of the puzzle.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I mean, in my opinion, it's probably the least important. I mean, it's definitely important to
Exactly.
have that there, but the fact of the matter is, these there's been guys breeding this stuff for a very long time, and
Of
a lot of
course.
people battle between the indica sativa hybrid thing. I mean, essentially everything that we have on the market is hybrid based. It may be more sativa leaning or indica leaning, but they bred these genetics to have a super strong THC profile, and a lot of them are very equivalent. It's who's growing it the best, and in ways that increase terpene enrichment. So a terpene rich flower, in my opinion, trumps high THC all day, every day. And any experienced grower or user
Absolutely.
would agree. So just and again, it's more of an educational piece. That's why it's important for our guys working in retail to really educate people on terpenes and what they mean.
So Clay, I'm just okay. So I'm sure that everybody that's listening is more or less they have their head wrapped around this stuff. But just for the sake of conversation, can you just touch base briefly on what terpenes are? How do they affect flower? If you could just like maybe spotlight one or two to give us an example, just in case we have some folks that are maybe new to a wholesale world, really trying to diversify, and they're like, what is this terpene that you're talking about here?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the three main terpenes that you're going to find in cannabis, and there are others. Mitrine is it's essentially it's the smell, of the flower. So sometimes you'll get an earthy, musty, herbal smelling flower, and that's your migraine. Sometimes you'll get a citrusy, bright, zesty smelling flower, which is more, sativa leaning. You'll find your sativas have that, profile in it, and that's limonene. Then, you have your periophylline, which is more peppery, spicy, woody, that type of deal. And it's more so just the scent profile that you find, in a plant is what determines your terpene profile. And I would say, your migraine is your most common. It's going to be more like relaxing and sedative, kind of like your indica varieties. You'll find more of your indica varieties have a higher, migraine level in it. Your limonene, again, is more your sativa. It's citrusy, so it's more uplifting, mood elevating. And your caryophyllene is more of your anti-inflammatory. So stuff that has enriched like CBD or CBG in it, you'll find
Yeah.
more caryophyllene in that one. And again, it's
I,
all based off of the smell.
That's the interesting part too. I think in terms of like the language we're allowed to use in stores, I always find that terpenes kind of give us that bridge to more medicinal, like wellness conversation. That, obviously we can't make medical claims in this industry, as, especially people in the hemp industry. Nothing that we say has been FDA certified, so we can't make medical claims. But there have been lots of studies done about the effects of terpenes. So it's a good way for us to be able to talk about things being mood uplifting or being sleepy or being anti-inflammatory or calming without making those effects on the cannabis strains themselves. It gives us kind of that bridge to that conversation.
Yeah, and if you want to look even deeper into it, I mean, terpenes go
That's
beyond
cool.
cannabis, right? I mean,
Oh, yes.
it's if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, I mean, look at different foods and what terpene profiles are in different foods or
Oh,
flowers, or I mean,
yeah.
it's terpenes.
Lavender.
Terpenes are a big deal, if you want to get really into it. But if you're into that kind of thing, I think people should be. It's
Yes.
really cool. It's really cool
Yeah.
how it all kind of works together.
It really does. And on kind of that note, I know that obviously we've got this whole spectrum of terpenes that are floating around and all of this breeding that's going on between all of these major lineages and genetic markers, and strains these days are so confusing. I feel like there are some that people just know, they remember, you've got Pineapple Express, you have OG Kush, you have Granddaddy Purple, things that are very familiar even to a basic cannabis audience. But when it comes to strains, I mean, my goodness, there are so many out there and everything is being crossed and recrossed. And how does a staff navigate that landscape when there are new strains popping up all the time?
Yeah, so I mean, it way back in the day, it started from original land races, right? So, all these
Right.
strains came from somewhere. It didn't like we haven't been breeding thousands and thousands upon thousands of strains for however many years now. They started from original land races. So I would say when navigating that and seeing, because a lot of the times it's rotating, right? You have a new batch of this or that or the other that comes through on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. I always recommend Leafly. Leafly, will give you the genetic profile of that, and it'll tell you who the parents are. So you'll if you're a sour diesel lover, and you're looking for that sour diesel origin, there are multiple strains out there that they've crossed sour diesel with, that you'll actually find on those information pages, and it'll let you know, hey, this is actually of sour diesel, or this is of a Skittles variety, or this is of a Runts variety, and this is a Runts crossed with sour diesel, and that's why we came up with this crazy name. So there's
Right.
just so many out there, and if you again, I recommend using Leafly. Just look back at the lineage of it and the genetic profile, and that'll also give you a breakdown of realistically what your terpene profile should look like within that flower. So again, that there you can touch on your terpene profile as well as your on average what your THC content is in it, and your CBD and CBG. So I highly recommend doing your research and kind of having that information on hand whenever you have new strains that come in. Doesn't take very long to kind of browse through it, and create flower or flyers if you need be, to have
Yeah.
them in the shop, and to be able to really speak to it.
Absolutely. We have a menu in our stores that rotates on a weekly basis with what we have. And those things usually outline major terpenes, tasting notes, effects guidelines, things like that. So even if a customer doesn't want to have that conversation with a bud tender, some people are just shy, that it gives them a point of reference to begin a conversation or to at least feel acquainted with the knowledge. And I mean, hey, there are what, like almost 1,000 strains out there on the market today.
Oh
Like
yeah, more than that. Yeah.
it's crazy. So
Yeah.
I feel like it would be insane for us to expect our bud tenders to maintain a knowledge data bank that's that large. So having a kind of a cheat sheet on hand that rotates with your stock, we often find that that's a really good way to just kind of build confidence for our bud
Yeah.
tenders so they're not super confused the whole time.
Yeah, no, and that's, goes back to, again, whenever you get those new strains in, I see a lot of the, more professional hemp shops and recreational medicinal shops. When you go in, I mean, a lot of these guys have iPads, and, they have, like you said, like we do, a menu, and that's something that you can flip through and actually pull all this information up and let the customer
Yeah,
read it,
indeed.
if it's easier for you to go that route.
Exactly. It's just about hedging your bets and making those conversations as easy as they can be. Now, you touched on something kind of interesting there in that, you want to be able to have that conversation with different customers. I think a part of the reason for that is that you want to make sure that your flower inventory is varied enough to suit most of your different customers because strains are not a one size fits all thing. Granddaddy Purple is a fantastic strain. It doesn't mean it's the right strain for me. So making sure to keep variety on hand is so important to the success of your shop and making sure your budtenders have consistently fresh, varied recommendations to make.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and again, it's just important to me just to have, again, that personal relationship with your clients that are coming in, and
Yeah.
being able to have those conversations and saying, hey, look, you really liked this last week. I have, this is very similar to that with its, THC and terpene profile, and this is the new strain that it is, and I highly recommend you try it. So. Yeah, again, just having the knowledge around that and being able to speak to it and knowing what you have, at all times is very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful that we're able to offer our wholesale customers kind of that big portfolio to choose from. So, we are so obsessed with keeping strains fresh and rotated, and we pick up familiar strains and we get crazy exotics or even like breeder specific strains, which is really cool stuff that nobody else has been able to get. Is really neat. So we always have those different choices, those different tiers, flower quality, whole different varieties for people to choose from, which I think gives people a lot of good ammunition just walking in.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. And I should mention at this point that we do have a strain guide that we've been working on for our system. So I know you mentioned Leafly briefly, but when we went to craft our strain guide, we went through and pulled information from Leafly, from a bunch of different sources, as well as customer feedback, personal bud tender experience, and other scientific data that we were able to pull. So we feel like we've put together a really solid cheat sheet for bud tenders to be able to use. So I think right now we've launched it with about 50 strains with detailed profiles, and we're growing it all the time. As a serious strain nerd myself, I was really happy that we were kind of embarking on this project. Have you had a chance to really look through it yet?
So yeah, I've definitely looked through it, and yeah, I mean that's all great stuff. Again, that's just something that's really nice to have on hand. That if the customer feels more confident in reading it, and it's a lot of information, right? And there's a lot of changes, a lot of new strains that come out again on a weekly, monthly basis, and just it's a lot of information to know, especially with it being ever changing. So yeah, just having that information on hand is huge.
Absolutely. And just so everybody that's listening knows, that guide is available for free through our website. So any of your bud tenders can access that information all the time. So if you happen to get a new strain in, you're curious about it, you feel like maybe you can't find all of the information that you need in one other place, that's there just especially for you, which should be hopefully a big help. Now, when it comes to cannabis retail environments, we have folks that come in and say things like, what do you have that's new? How do you think a bud tender behind the counter can guide that conversation to find the perfect product for that customer? Where do you think you begin that conversation?
And are you talking like just flowers specifically, or just products in general, or?
Just in general. So if you have somebody that walks into your shop, because we all know that strains and things don't just exist in a vacuum of flower. You have those strains and terpene profiles that can carry over into other products too.
Yeah.
So how with a whole store at your fingertips do you start to narrow that process?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's more so asking the right questions around, what if this is an experienced customer that's in pretty frequently, and you know what they're buying. A lot of these guys get in routine and they buy the same old things over and over again, right? Just asking them the questions around, hey, what are you using this for? Is this something that is to help you with pain, or is this something that's helping you with sleep, or is this something that you're doing recreationally? Do you prefer smoking over edibles, or even like drinking beverages, or tinctures, or this or that or the other? have you ever tried an edible? Oh, well, a lot of people will say, yeah, I've done edibles, but they didn't really sit well with me. That's a lot of the answer that you're going to get all the time because they've tried something that was probably a little too heavy, or a little too strong. So, with those kind of
Sure.
people, you walk them over and you give them a really, even an experienced user that smokes on a regular basis, give them a low dose edible and say, hey, here's a few of our different edible options. Here's some of our lower dose options. We can increase the dosage as we need, but try this, try this out. If this is something that you're smoking to help you sleep, hey, here's our nighttime gummy. This has got 30 milligrams in it. It's 10 Delta 9, 10 CBN, 10 CBG. And I noticed that you're using a lot of indica heavy flowers, that help you sleep. Try this gummy out. It really helps, this many people that come in here and buy it all the time. And I
Ah,
highly
there's the
recommend it
cross
if
sell. Look at
if this
you.
is, yeah, if this is something that you're using it for, this is another product that we created around that subject. So again, just knowing your customers and what they're using the product for, you can kind of lean them into trying new things and different things and those kind of ways.
Yeah, of course. How do you think that using something like a strain guide can be helpful with sort of steering those decisions?
Yeah, so I mean, your strain guide is going to kind of list out all your, indica heavy, sativa heavy, hybrid varieties that really tell you what that customer is going for. If they're using indica, varieties, a lot of times they're probably using that, at night, something to help them mellow down and relax. And then you can go to your different section of the store to where you have, whether it be tinctures, beverages, gummies, other edible options that fit, that part of the conversation and just kind
Yeah.
of guide them around, what else you have to offer in those kind of ways. If it's somebody that's liking, a sativa variety or your sativa varieties, you can also take them over to those same sections, with, let's say, for instance, you got a guy that's smoking a lot of sativas, likes to use it during the day recreationally. Well, we also have, this Boost seltzer over here that has yerba mate. It has 100 milligrams of caffeine in it with, 10 milligrams of Delta 9. It's really, a daytime uplifting sociable buzz. Have you ever considered, trying this beverage out? Because it kind of fits into the same category that you're using this flower for. And
Sure.
there's many other options out there that are like that fit into the same category. So just knowing those categories and again, just kind of more so knowing your customer and what they're using the product for, you can kind of lead you into, more conversations around, what else you have in store to offer.
I love that. And I love how you use that kind of more almost flower specific information to just have a jumping off point to lead to other things. Because even just having information in front of you gives you a common conversation point and you can kind of steer things from there. So I love that approach. I think that's so helpful for folks. Now, this is one we get a lot, especially from new bud tenders. So customers come in, right, and they're like, "Oh, I'm such an indica girly," or "I've been really feeling sativas lately." Or we get a lot of folks at Salisbury that are really into balanced hybrids. But we all know that like a sativa is not a sativa is not a sativa. They're all a little bit different. So in our case, normally at any of our given shops, we have between 20 and 40 strains on hand at any given time, which is a huge selection that most folks don't carry. So when it comes to walking in and someone has 10 sativas to choose from, where do we go from there? Like how do you take that information that they're looking for a sativa heavy strain and find the right one for them?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple different ways you can go about it, but I would say that, yeah, if you have 10 sativas sitting there, a lot of these people are going to come in and everybody's different. Me and you may like two different sativa varieties, right? So, you may like this one that has, more of a diesely, citrusy nose to it. A lot of people go by look and smell, too. So, based off of, again, that falls around terpene. So based off of the terpene profile that's in that, flower, and look, overall is what a lot of people go for. But I think what we have in place right now with the information guide and kind of breaking down, all these different bullet points on, hey, this is the strain that's available. This is the terpene profile. This is, the feel that you're going to get off of it type of deal. And these are the studies that prove it. You can really dial in on what that person's going for because everybody has their own, feel that they're looking for, their own, potency, their own terpene profile, and what kind of flavor content they want in it. And just with that information guide alone, it'll help you, narrow down on what 1 out of the 10 or 2 out of the 10 sativas that they're looking for.
Absolutely. And what's crazy is that those people, if you just take some time to explore those things, even with a customer that thinks they know exactly what they want, It helps so much in terms of bonding your customers to your bud tenders because your bud tender becomes like your sommelier. They're there to help you make recommendations for your life in the moment sometimes. We have really frequent customers that are very much cannabis experienced that will come in and they want recommendations from their bud tender, even though they know. Because at this point, after a few visits, you've dialed things in so closely that normally when that customer walks in the door, you'll know what you have on hand that's going to be a really good fit for them, which is awesome. So they're unlikely to go someplace else where they have to build that relationship again. It just gives you that point to build a regular consumer.
That's right.
I love that. So we also, I know you had touched earlier on things that are like beginner friendly versus experienced customers. How does a retailer use something like a cannabis strain guide differently for a beginner than they would for an experienced shopper?
Yeah. So, I mean, beginners coming in, again, I like to start small method, if you find that somebody's coming in, they've never tried a cannabis product in
Well,
their life,
so
right?
so play with me here. Let me be I'm gonna be your first time user and you walk me through the beginnings of a recommendation using the information that you already have, obviously. So, hi Clay. I know absolutely nothing about cannabis, but I'd like to try some flower today. Where do I get started?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, in that kind of a situation, you would take the person over if they're obviously they're interested in trying to smoke something. So you take them over to, your flower area. And, in a lot of these areas, you have really, high THC flower, you have some mild flower, you have, different pre-roll options that are infused, that are non-infused, that type of deal. Obviously this person's not experienced, so they're probably not going to know how to, take that flower and use it without, some sort of piece that they're using, or especially like rolling something. So you're probably not going to want to sell them a jar of flour right off rip, but you're going to want to take them over to some of your, premium pre-rolls and, ask them if they'd like to try a pre-roll. That would be my recommendation. Try to find something that's very mild, and let them know that they do not have to, them the whole thing, maybe take a few draws off of it and sit back and relax for a while and see if that does it for you. And if it doesn't, you can always pick it back up. So, that's kind of the real conversation that I would have with that person that's trying to, right off rip, smoke something that they've never, smoked before. Smoking is, it's going to obviously hit you a little bit quicker than your, your standard edible. I know we have nano emulsified edibles now that, and all that means it's fast acting. It's going to kick in within 15 to 20 minutes a lot of the times. And for the people that are, not really wanting to smoke, but maybe wanting to try a beverage or a gummy or, a mint, there's so many different options out there, these days when it comes to edibles. I would start them off at, a 2.5 to 5 milligram, cap, and tell them to try that and give it a couple hours. Don't be impatient and take one 10 minutes later because you're not feeling anything. Start small and work your way up. So, in those ways, with a beginner, again, you kind of want to, start them easy and let them work their way into it. You don't want to go over there and grab a hash infused pre-roll and say, try this. I mean,
Yeah, of
it's
course.
probably going to bug them out, and it's probably going to be too much for them.
We don't want to
So,
send anybody to the
don't,
scary place.
again, yeah, just start small and work your way up. And, I find that to be, a lot more enjoyable for beginners.
Yeah, of course. I
Yeah.
think it's important to sort of eliminate this idea that you have to go as hard as you can, and that if you can't take 100 milligram dose at a time, that you're not in the cool kids club or
Yep.
whatever. I think it's up to the bud tenders to normalize entry level doses. I know there are a lot of experienced users that manage their tolerances really carefully so that they don't have to take those high doses. And that's certainly something that you can talk to the customers about. And I think that when it comes to like flower in particular, I think it's so important to align yourself with a customer's goals and get an idea of what they want out of a cannabis experience. And I think like for experienced shoppers, I mean, and you tell me, Clay, what you think here, but I think with an experienced shopper, it comes down to like, what do you like about cannabis? What do you dislike about cannabis? And kind of trying to dial in mitigating or enhancing those particular effects. Some people like a really stony, like classic indica. Some people like something that's really sleepy. So I think getting an idea of where people want to end up at the end of the day is a good like path to a recommendation.
I agree
What do you think?
100%.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Yeah. I mean, just again, knowing, one, knowledge around your product and knowledge around your client, asking the right
Oh
questions, get
yeah.
to know them. I mean, be personable with them. Tell them, give them, if you're an experienced user and you use, the product, give them your feedback, on what you think on this or that or the other. And a lot of these guys and ladies will open up, and tell you, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is the field that I'm looking for. And just knowing that information about your client will kind of open up the door to, okay, a lot of different options that, that we have to offer.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And if a customer walked into okay, so let's say you're staffing a Hemp Doctor location today, Clay. I'm so sorry. When a customer isn't sure of exactly what to choose, like what direction to go in, if you say, "Hey, what are you looking for today?" and they say, "I'm not really sure," what do you think the first like two or three things a bud tender should try to find out? Like, what do you think those things are? This doesn't have to be really complex, just like a couple of quick things. Maybe some questions that they should ask.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'd ask, what their interests are. Are you interested in using this thing recreationally, or are you using this thing because you have aches and pains? Like, does your body hurt? Are you looking for a
Oh,
more,
that's a good one.
healthy alternative? Are you having trouble sleeping? Or, are you, you know, are you having trouble eating or anything like that? Just ask those questions around, what they're like, what they're trying to get out of it. Because a lot of these people that come in, yeah, they don't know a lot about it, but they've also, probably done their own, research and kind of have a good idea about, what it is about exactly. And that'll kind of give you the reasoning for why they're in there, and based off of that
Okay.
conversation and actually figuring out, what they're in there for and what they're looking for. Then you can base your conversation off of, what it is that you have to offer.
So we want to get kind of their motivation. So that might be the first thing. What do you think the next question is that's going to give them a great recommendation?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, a lot of these shops, I mean, you have smokable, and you have edibles and you have beverages, and then just, I mean, you have those two. So just finding out,
Sure.
hey, are
That's so
you,
important too,
yeah, I
Clay. I
mean,
think people ignore that.
yeah, I mean, some people they don't want to smoke. It's not for
Right.
them. But I mean, and that's why we have edible options. That's why we have seltzers and
Exactly.
beverages.
There's a
So
time and
really,
place for
yeah.
everything.
I mean, don't be afraid to ask that question. Just, hey, are you interested in eating this product? Are you interested in smoking? That type of deal. Oh no, I don't want to smoke it. Oh, okay, great. Well, don't even worry about all the flour and pre rolls and whatnot. We have 150 different options over here in gummy form or chocolate or beverage. And a lot of those you don't want to waste your time and really rub them the wrong way by not asking the right questions up front and knowing what they're looking for. I see a lot of people
Right.
waste their time and say, oh, it's your first time, come over here and check out this flower, which we all know flower is a big seller, probably one of the biggest movers in the industry right now. But there's a lot of people that want to drink, want a beverage
Yeah.
or a chocolate or don't and they're not really interested in smoking it. So ask the question,
Yeah.
ask the question and find out what how they want to use it.
Yeah, I think lifestyle considerations are so important. And again, like you said, I feel like people tend to get really excited about things like flour, but really, like flour is sort of, I mean, we think about edibles as being like a very potent experience, and they are. But when it comes to flour, it's actually kind of the deep end of the pool, right? Like, I feel like most people don't get started just like rolling something up in this day and age. You might try a seltzer first, you might try a low dose edible, you might be interested in a vape, something really incognito. I think the when and where of it is so important too, like daytime, nighttime, get an idea of kind of when they're going to be using these products.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, 100%. And yeah, I mean, again, it's just asking those questions. I can't be more, upfront about that. Just kind of finding out what they're in there for, if they're willing to smoke it, or if they're not, or would you like to look at an edible option? Then a lot of these people too that may have tried it a long time ago, maybe in edible form. A lot of the people that really didn't have the best experience on it because everything wasn't really tested back in the day like it is today. And just having that education piece around, letting them know, hey, this isn't your old school brownie that you got. It was probably 100 milligrams that you took a bite off of, and it was way too much for you. We've actually like
Yeah,
these things are lab tested and approved, and
it's
if
very
you, I
precise.
don't want you to worry about being bugged out and this being too much. I want you to again start small, and here's a 5 milligram mint, or here's a 5 milligram Southern High beverage that's a seltzer, and I promise you drink this whole thing, it's not going to put you in that place. It's these everything has been tested and approved, and this is a very small starting point, and if you need more
Hmm.
you can always have more. So I feel like a lot of people are nervous coming back into it if they have had a bad experience, but
Mm.
just reassuring them that if you
Oh
give them the right
gosh.
product and it's a low dose, like that's it's not going to be that way.
It's true, and making sure to gauge their experiences against what cannabinoids they're using. I have to share this one real quick, Clay, because this was just one of those like crazy moments that I felt like was such a good lesson. So we had a customer that showed up in store a while back who came in with his daughter, who was of age, obviously. And he said that he bought her some edibles at a different store, and that she had been like completely obliterated, like had a really bad time. She went to the scary zone. We've all been there. And he was like, I just don't understand how this would happen. It's supposed to be a 10 milligram dose. I thought 10 milligrams was a fairly common, like light user dose, which I would more or less agree with. Maybe not beginner, but a light dosage. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Is she a cannabis user? And the answer was yes. And again, it's just kind of interesting that you would see somebody that's, at least an occasional user. 10 milligrams isn't really that heavy. So I started asking questions in terms of what brand he'd purchased before. What were the gummies that he'd given her? Well, it turns out what he had purchased from the other shop was 10 milligrams. 5 milligrams of that was THCP.
Yep.
So,
So
right.
yeah, that would be the
So
reasoning why. Yeah.
exactly. So, and he had gone to some place that had a bud tender that didn't bother to ask, like, "Hey, do you have any experience with THCP? Do you understand how the potency works?" So he went home thinking he was giving his daughter this 10 milligram Delta 9 gummy, and that is not the experience she got. So I feel
No.
like asking questions and making sure to clarify, even with experienced users, like, what have you been using? Have you had success with? What's missing from that can be so important, because you don't want to end
Exactly.
up like that guy's daughter. That seemed like
Yeah.
that was a bad time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm confident that our guys, in our stores, they know the difference between Delta 9 and THCP. And again, it goes back,
Oh, of
on the
course.
education piece. THCP is 50 times stronger than Delta 9. So if a beginner walks in, I would never ever give them even half a milligram of that. I
No.
would start them off with a mild dose of Delta 9, maybe with some added CBG or CBD in it, because if you mix your
Sure.
Delta 9 and CBD together, the CBD kind of mellows out the psychoactiveness effects of
Gosh,
Delta
it
9. So just
does.
just knowing, those things, which again our guys do and our ladies do, and having that education around, that person that's selling the product in the shop is so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I'm so sorry because I feel like I've gotten you off topic here, so I apologize. But when it comes to strains, because I know that's kind of where we want to sit, like looking at things that are beyond that percentage, that are beyond that instant sell factor. If somebody has a strain they know they like, how do you explain how that translates to another product? So, for example, like our fucked up 420 gummies. They contain live rosin compounds from the actual strains that they're associated with. So not only, are you taking a pineapple OG gummy that tastes like pineapple, but you have something that incorporates the terpene effects of pineapple OG. So how do you explain to somebody the science of how we put pineapple OG into a gummy per se,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, so
or a vape or whatever?
yeah, yeah, and that's, I mean, honestly, when transitioning somebody from flower to an edible, or vape, or anything else, just kind of like just how you put it. If you like a pineapple OG flower, well, hey, we've got pineapple OG vapes, we've got pineapple OG gummies. It's got that same terpene profile, that we've actually taken out of the plant and put into an extract that goes into the gummy, or in liquid form that goes into the vape. So
Yeah.
and the ways that they do that is they process down the plants, and it's kind of the same way they make like multivitamins in a way. They'll pull out, all the myrcene here, and they'll pull out all the limonene here, and all the carophene here, and they'll, basically take that and use the terpene profiles that's prevalent in different strains, and their different makeups, and they'll put those terpenes back into other products like gummies, or vapes, or anything else. So it's going to have similar effects, similar
Yeah.
flavor profile. But yeah, I guess that's a simple way of putting it.
I love that. No,
Yeah.
that makes complete sense, Clay. And I think like and the cool part about it is now we're able to incorporate so many different formats of like those strain specific concentrates into other products. We have live resin, we have live rosin, and then of course like we have what's in our zooted vapes like the HTEs, which I mean really if you've ever hit one of those vapes, they really do taste a lot like the native flower strains. So we're getting better and better at dialing in kind of what that experience looks like, which I feel like is just so important to the overall experience. It really carries over into the other formats.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I guess the easiest way of explaining that to a customer walking in that really doesn't have knowledge around how it got there is, I mean, there's a reason why they call this pineapple OG and that pineapple OG and that pineapple OG. It's got the same chemical makeup in it, just in different form. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that'd probably be the easiest way of explaining it to a client.
Yeah, that's a great way to
Yeah.
explain it, Clay. I love that. So And when it comes, so this is a question that we had submitted to us. So I'm interested to see kind of what you think. Again, you go into a lot of wholesale outfits. You see what a lot of retail setups are like. So a lot of stores decide on how to organize based on strain type or potency or effect. Like I think when it comes to shelf strategy and how to merchandise your products, do you have any trends that you're seeing right now that seem to be really working in terms of introducing customers to the product line? Like what strategy seems to be helping?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty similar to how we have our stores set up. I mean, every store is different, unique in their own way. But I would say as long as you have your products by category, so as long as you have like your flower products and your pre-roll products and, your flower category here, and, then you have, maybe, your beverage category in a cooler or over here in this section, then have all your gummies in this section, have all your other edibles like your chocolates and, any other edible form in their own section, just have it, in each in their own individual category is the best way to set it up because then you can kind of go through, each category all together, all in one type of deal and have a way easier conversation than, running from this side of the store to that side of the store looking at
Yeah.
two different pre-rolls, if that
It
makes
kind of
sense.
narrows the
Yeah.
scope too a little
Yeah.
bit. I think you're right in terms of like organizing by category that just kind of makes sense. And you're right, that is how we do things in the store. And then we usually organize after that by strain and like, your sativas into your indicas. Again, I think it's all about narrowing the field of vision because people have so many options that just finding a calm, like small space that's going to belong to them in the store is going to be really helpful. So I think you're absolutely right. Like a categorizational strategy really does seem to work well.
100%. Yeah, and I like what you just said there. Definitely, have all your indica varieties together here and all your, hybrid varieties here, sativa varieties, don't, have them all together too. And that makes life way easier when trying to explain stuff to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's 100% true. And when you're looking at things like the retail trends, because again, you're out there in a way that I'm not out there. I see what's happening from inside our locations. But what are retailers getting right? What do you see consistently being helpful in terms of building sales? And what do you see stores that are really, what are they challenged on? What do you think most retailers could benefit from improving?
Yes, I think that what they're getting right, and it just takes time. And the challenge at the same time is, I mean, you can have two stores in the same town that are 5 miles apart, and one store may be, more, flower heavy on sales and pre-rolls, whereas the other store may be more edible and, beverage heavy. They sell more, edibles and beverages than they do, pre-rolls. And there may be another store in the middle that sells more vapes than edibles or pre-rolls. So really, just knowing your area and knowing your clientele and what they're looking for when inventorying for your store situation is huge because every store is a little unique in their own way, just give or take, with the people that you have coming in, and that specific area. So yeah, just knowing your area, knowing what's moving, knowing what you need more of on the shelf. Again, based off a category more so than anything else, is huge. I see so many people that, when they fail, they go in and they think that they're going to sell a lot of this, and they're not really paying attention to, okay, well, I've got a ton of flour in here, right? And we're just not moving through it. Like it's going bad before we can move through it because we have two other locations that are moving this much flour and we're selling through our vapes and edibles like crazy. Well, you need to reduce your flower section a little bit and put more, vape and edible option or whatever the case may be in that particular store in order to, be on par with who you have coming in. So yeah, just knowing your category, knowing your location, what kind of clientele you have coming in and what you really need to keep on the shelf.
Absolutely. I think we definitely see that in terms of a misstep, at least with dispensaries that I've visited before. I think people have a tendency to just kind of do their thing and not necessarily consider the market that they're in. So you get like a super, hey man, like stonery place in a place that's more clean cut and professional, and they want something different out of a cannabis experience. So
Yep.
I think you're absolutely right. Kind of catering it to who your clients are going to be is so important. And I think customer education too. I mean, I think that I don't run into a lot of places that educate their bud tenders really well. If I ask a bud tender what the ice cream cake is like, they might say good or yeah, it's fire, man. But like that
Yeah.
doesn't really give me a good picture as to what it is. I mean, I certainly think that's an area where we as like a whole industry could improve.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll say as a representative of the Hemp Doctor, as well as our other staff here that deals with retailers and distributors, we do extremely well with just education alone. So
Oh
on our
yeah.
products, we'll go in and it's not just a drop and go like, hey, you should know what this is type of deal. We'll actually take the time with the individuals that we see on a regular basis, and those bud tenders, and the employees that are actually pushing the product, and build knowledge around what our products are, what they do, what they're about, and really give them that knowledge to be able to speak to it, as clients are coming in, which I think really helps us stand out.
It does. And I'll tell you what, having been on, the training and development side here too, that when your bud tenders have that educational information, when they feel like they are equipped with the knowledge, they are so much more confident when it comes to sales. They're willing to put other things in front of customers. They're willing to cross sell. They're willing to sort of push their customers' boundaries a little bit to try to get them to try something new, which I think is fantastic. You go from having somebody that's, ringing up a $10 sale at a time for a couple of grams, which I mean is going to shoot your average order value in the foot, to somebody that's then willing to say, well, while you're at it, why don't you try this? Because they feel like they're a product expert. They're not just there to push buttons and open and close the till.
All right. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I mean, hey, now Clay, I understand you're a busy guy. I'm sure we're running short on time. So let me recap a couple of things just so we can end on the same page here. So I think we come to the conclusion that percentage does not give us the whole picture, right? Like THCA percentage, it's helpful, but it is not nearly the most important thing we're looking at.
Not at all. No, no. Again, just to recap on that, just really educate yourself on terpene profiles,
Yeah.
and everybody has their favorite strains and this and that and the other that they look for. Go look at those. Go look at those and go look at that terpene profile that's in them, and try to find something else, that's a different name that has a similar profile in it, and try it. And I guarantee you're probably going to like that the way that you do, your favorite strain. Okay. So just look at those terpene profiles and try to match it. Because yeah, I'm a firm believer, and a lot of others, are that, that has more than anything to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is so important, that terpenes and strain and how you're using a product. Because you're right, edible versus vape versus pre-roll really doesn't matter in terms of how a customer experiences cannabis. So I think all of those things are really what shops ought to be focusing on. And then in terms of using strains, I mean, of course, they are a fantastic guide, and understanding the nuances of them will dial in somebody's experience. But it's important to remember that not all strains affect everybody in the exact same way. Managing expectations and making sure that it's just a recommendation and sort of a most people experience, I think does help a lot.
Yep. No, I agree with you 100% there. Yeah. Just because I like something doesn't mean that you're going to like something. I kind of put it in the
Right.
same category as, if you really think about it, wine. You have white wines, you have red wines, you have, I
Hmm.
mean, a million different wine options. And me and you probably like, a different type of wine, different flavor profile, this or that or the other. It's the same thing with hemp, and cannabis. So
Of
everybody
course.
has their own niche, and they like what they like. And that's why there's all these different awesome options out there.
Excellent. I I really appreciated so much hearing your perspective on it, Clay. I feel like retailers are just trying to figure out ways that they can build that lasting trust with customers. And I think product like really cannabis education does get overlooked. We assume that because people are involved in the culture that they're the most knowledgeable about the culture walking in, and that's not always the case. So I'm glad we got to spotlight a couple of things today that might help our retail outfits be a little bit more agile when it comes to the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah, I would say the two key items to take away from this is know your client and know your product. If you have those two, I mean that's pretty much all that it takes to really be able to explain yourself, and to push other product in ways that you may not be able to if you didn't have them.
That's great advice for
Yeah,
anybody, really, including myself.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yes, so anybody listening, you can, of course, check out our strain guide at any time via our website. And I'm sure we'll post a link in our video content as well so you guys can check it out. But that will give your bud tenders a great jumping off point to start understanding the wild and wonderful world of cannabis breeding, cannabis genetics, and how all of those awesome chemical compounds come together to make this really cool plant. So, Clay, thank you so much for joining me today. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. I will let you go, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah, anytime, anytime. I appreciate you having me, and yeah, I think this is great information to get out there, and yeah, you just let me know if I can help in any other way.
Excellent, Clay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great day, listeners. Bye.
See ya.